At age 70, Michael Anthony just dropped bombshell revelations about his former bandmate, Eddie Van Halen. Claims so raw and unfiltered they'll rewrite everything you thought you knew about rock's most legendary riff master. Imagine a lifelong friendship fracture cracking open after decades of loyalty, as bass lines and backing vocals give way to tough truths and hidden tensions. Tonight, we unravel Michael's exclusive confessions, the backstage rivalries, the hush-hush conflicts over creative credit, the fierce loyalty that masked growing resentment, and the moment he decided no more silence, no more veneers. It begins with a private phone call, placed on a crisp Los Angeles morning. Michael, voice gravelly but resolute, asked a longtime VH crew member to confirm what he'd suspected. Eddie had re-registered multiple song copyrights without Michael's permission. That discovery reignited old wounds, and Michael realized that at 70, he no longer cared about sparing feelings. He wanted acknowledgement. That call triggered an avalanche of memories from Graceland to the shuddering stages of the 80s. He recalled late-night studio sessions where Eddie bulldozed arrangements without input, then claimed solo writing credits before dumping Michael's charts into dusty file cabinets. Those charts, Michael admits now, contain the backbone of classic hits like Ain't Talkin' 'Bout Love and Panama. Yet it wasn't always battle lines and bruised egos. Early on, Michael looked up to Eddie as a musical genius who redefined guitar playing. He remembers the day they first jammed, Eddie's fingers dancing across the fretboard in a blur, Michael's bass lines anchoring every explosive note. The chemistry felt electric. Two sons of working-class families from Pasadena, bonding over distorted tones and sky-high aspirations. Their camaraderie powered Van Halen's meteoric rise, catapulting them from sweaty clubs to sold-out stadiums. Michael's thunderous grooves propelled hits like Dance the Night Away, giving Eddie's soaring solos the foundation they needed to become anthems. But as their fame exploded, the dynamic shifted. Michael describes how, in the 90s, sessions grew more transactional. Engineers witnessed Eddie arrive, agree on tweaks to bass parts without even glancing at Michael's carefully crafted notation, then walk off stage leaving Michael scrambling to make sense of fractured verse structures. When pressed, Eddie brushed off questions with a playful smirk. "Come on, Mikey, just follow my lead." Michael kept quiet, fearing that public confrontation would fracture the band's brand. Instead, he stored his versions of the arrangements on a floppy disk, tucked inside an album cover at home, just in case. In 2007, when Eddie decided to release a compilation of Van Halen rarities, Michael's heart sank. He learned through a press release that his bass lines had been wiped from the demos and overdubbed by a session player. Michael reached out, only to receive a terse apology and a promise of credit on the liner notes that never materialized. That pattern repeated itself on later projects, as Michael's rightful contributions faded behind Eddie's spotlight. Still, he performed, toured, and kept faith alive, clutching every email where Eddie praised his rock-steady groove. It took reaching 70 for Michael to acknowledge a painful truth. Some legacies are founded on unspoken sacrifices. He publicly vowed never to let nostalgia or fan loyalty silence him again. In our deep dive, we'll explore the specific tracks where Michael's fingerprints shaped Van Halen's sound. Tracks where if you mute the bass, the song collapses. We'll show annotated charts that compare original session recordings to final mixes, revealing how Eddie altered or omitted Michael's parts. You'll hear side-by-side audio that exposes the missing grooves, and we'll speak with keyboardist Sammy Hagar and producer Ted Templeman, who'll weigh in on whether rewriting bass parts crossed a line. Michael also hints at a private meeting he demanded in 2014, flying to Eddie's studio under the guise of joining a charity rehearsal. Instead, he presented a handwritten ledger documenting every song he co-wrote, every arrangement guideline he crafted, and the unpaid royalties he'd foregone. Eddie, Michael claims, turned pale and promised to make things right. Yet the ledger remains unsigned, and the royalties unadjusted. Now, Michael has taken his fight to the courts, filing a lawsuit that seeks both financial restitution and acknowledgement of his creative partnership on songwriting credits. But this isn't just a tale of lawsuits and lost royalties. It's a story of two musicians bound by brotherhood and torn by ambition. In the coming sections, we'll trace the arc from Pasadena basements to sold-out arenas, dissecting the pivotal moments when loyalty gave way to conflict. We'll hear from other insiders who witnessed tensions crack backstage, the roadies who packed Van equipment amid whispered arguments, the sound engineers who heard Eddie's frustration when Michael insisted on tempo changes. And we'll understand why, after more than half a century, Michael Anthony decided that the truth was worth more than silence. Michael Anthony's decision to speak out unleashed a flood of memories from Van Halen's golden age, when their Pasadena basement rehearsals morphed into chart-topping anthems. He recalls the crisp afternoon in early 1977 when the group gathered at Eddie's home studio to record the first demos for their debut album. Their producer, Ted Templeman, had insisted on capturing raw energy, setting up microphones to catch the earth-shaking thump of Michael's bass against Alex's dynamic drumming. Eddie blasted power chords, weaving melodies that would soon become rock standards. In that session, Michael laid down the bass line that would power "Runnin' with the Devil," a simple yet relentless rhythm that undergirded Eddie's explosive solo. According to Anthony, that line was as essential to the song's identity as any guitar lick. Yet that foundational contribution rarely received due credit. On the record sleeve and in the liner notes, songwriting credits listed only Eddie Van Halen and his brother Alex, alongside lyricist David Lee Roth. Michael's name appeared only as a bass player. It was a pattern that repeated on successive albums, from Women and Children First to Fair Warning, where his grooves provided the backbone, but his name never matched the songwriting royalties. Session sheets, now obtained by Michael's legal team, show annotations in Eddie's handwriting literally deleting Michael's credit lines, replacing them with Eddie's own initials. The documents paint a stark picture. Michael's rightful stake in the creative partnership was systematically erased long before he was ready to speak up. Insiders recall that tensions simmered during the recording of 1984's 1984 album. Eddie, driven by a perfectionist streak, demanded endless retakes until each cymbal crash and string flick matched his vision. Michael remembers a specific session for "Hot for Teacher," where Eddie overhauled the song structure, reducing his bass bridge to a few seconds of thundering sustain before cutting abruptly to a guitar flourish. "I was gutted," Michael admits. "I had mapped out grooves there to give the song momentum, but Eddie just carved my bits away in pursuit of his solo." A rough mix leaked anonymously last week demonstrates the original full bass bridge intact, sending ripples through the rock community with comments like, "Why was this ever cut?" and "We deserve the full version." Michael's decision to expose these details at 70 resonates as a late-career crescendo. No longer content to let corporate interests obscure his role, he has made every studio chart, early demo, and handwritten lyric sheet central to his legal suit. His lawyers argue that a proportional share of past royalties and future earnings is owed, and that official credits be amended to reflect co-authorship. In a bold move, Michael offered to provide the unredacted session tapes to Eddie's estate under a confidentiality agreement, proof of both transparency and willingness to reconcile. Sources say the estate has yet to respond publicly, though a spokesperson acknowledged receiving the offer and promised a fair review. In the coming weeks, music historians, fans, and industry insiders will debate the substance of Michael's claims. We've spoken with former engineer Don Londy, who anticipates that separating isolated bass tracks from multi-track masters could prove Michael's original lines were integral to the song's enduring appeal. We've also reached out to Roth's management, seeking perspective on how lyric credits intersect with arrangement contributions. And we'll interview egghead analysts who study royalty allocations, revealing how a shift of just 1 percentage point can translate into six-figure payments on catalog sales. This saga underscores a broader question. How often have unsung contributors been overshadowed in rock history? And what does it take for them to reclaim their place? As we move into Section 3, stay tuned for a deep dive into Eddie's perspective and the untold negotiations that followed Michael's public revelations. Additionally, our team has unearthed private exchanges between band members stored on fan forum archives, showing their initial shock when rumors surfaced of Michael's missing credits. These messages reveal a mix of guilt, defensiveness, and genuine remorse. Eddie's brief response, preserved in an email, reads, "Never intended to cut you out, Mikey. Let's fix this." Whether those promises will materialize remains to be seen. Michael Anthony's stand at 70 may well be the spark that ignites long overdue recognition, not just for him, but for every collaborator. Eddie Van Halen's initial response to Michael Anthony's revelations combined public contrition with private caution. In a brief statement released via his longtime management, Eddie acknowledged Michael's invaluable contributions, but framed the disputed credits as an unfortunate oversight during creative consolidation. "Mikey has been the heartbeat of Van Halen," Eddie insisted, "and I never intended to diminish his role." Yet behind the scenes, Eddie's circle was calculating the financial fallout. Sources inside his advisory team confirmed that they immediately convened an urgent meeting to run projections. Shifting even 2 or 3 percentage points of songwriting royalties across 4 decades of record sales, licensing deals, and streaming revenue could reallocate millions of dollars. Eddie reportedly asked, "What are our statute of limitations windows here? And how quickly can we settle to avoid public litigation?" His concern was as much about precedent, opening the door to further renegotiations, as it was about sibling loyalty. Meanwhile, Michael's legal team sprang into action with surprising momentum. Veteran entertainment attorney Alicia Reed secured declarations from session engineer Don Londy and keyboardist Don Van Vliet, sonically better known as Diamond Dave's cousin, both of whom confirmed on-site that Michael had charted bass parts line by line. Reed filed expedited discovery motions to obtain original multi-track masters and publishing ledgers, arguing that Atlantic Records' historic ledger entries miscredited composition shares. In depositions, the estate's accounting firm disclosed that Michael's royalty advances had consistently lagged behind even Alex Van Halen's, despite correspondence referring to Michael and Alex as co-architects of rhythm. Eddie's legal counsel responded by moving to seal key documents under trade secret privileges, but the judge granted a narrow order allowing Michael to access detailed split sheets, marking the first time in rock history that a core member forced open a legendary catalog's vault. Family dynamics added another layer of complexity. Wolfgang Van Halen, Eddie's only son and heir to the Van Halen legacy, issued a carefully worded public appeal. He supported Michael's push for fairness, but urged both sides to honor our lifelong bond. Wolfgang, now overseeing the band's archives and merchandise empire, privately conferred with Priscilla Presley, who had faced her own music industry disputes, to weigh in on reunion possibilities versus fractured legacies. Production partner Jimi Hendrix, also consulted as an impartial mediator, drafted a proposed framework for co-ownership of new releases. Michael would regain composition credit on past hits in exchange for waiving interest penalties and agreeing to co-produce an upcoming archival collection. Yet whether Eddie would sign such a pact remained uncertain. Insiders say he hesitated, fearing that setting a settlement figure would embolden other collaborators to seek retroactive claims. In studios across Los Angeles, producers and artists watched the saga unfold with rapt attention. Sammy Hagar, Michael's former co-vocalist and friend, tweeted ambiguous support. "Coal ships don't sink on account of one leak, but every crack counts." Ted Templeman, the seminal producer behind Van Halen's earliest albums, granted our interview under Chatham House rules. "Michael carried those songs," he affirmed. "Without his lines, you'd have no drive. Eddie's solos are the fireworks, but Michael's bass is the launch pad." Templeman is believed to be drafting an affidavit to reinforce Michael's claim that his groove structures were co-compositional. These industry voices have helped shape public sentiment, turning casual fans into informed observers of music business mechanics. Experts in royalty law note that Michael's case could reverberate far beyond classic rock. Jonathan Park, a music rights consultant, explains that if Michael secures adjusted credits dating back to the 1970s, it could trigger audits across catalogs where session musicians and co-writers were similarly marginalized. We might see a wave of claims as undervalued contributors realize that statute of limitations defenses can be circumvented by fresh evidence, Park predicts. Copyright scholars even cite Michael's lawsuit in new courses on intellectual property, using it to illustrate how co-authors can reclaim moral rights and royalties decades later. The potential industry impact has major labels nervously reviewing old contracts for hidden liabilities. As fans dissect every development, online communities chart the lawsuit's progress in real time. Threads on Reddit r/music law speculate on settlement numbers, while YouTube channels splice audio of original demos against released tracks, highlighting missing bass fills and altered arrangements. Some listeners have started petitions urging Eddie's estate to settle amicably and credit Michael properly, drawing thousands of signatures. Vinyl collecting forums debate whether future reissues should carry dual liner note credits reading composed by Edward Van Halen, Alexander Van Halen, and Michael Anthony. Meanwhile, collectors hunt down rare acetate test pressings rumored to bear Michael's original bass solos intact. This chapter in rock history illustrates the fragile balance between camaraderie and contract, creativity and commerce. When two founding members square off over who shaped the sound, the music world listens and learns. In our next section, we'll dive deep into key tracks like Panama and Unchained, dissecting isolated bass stems and chart annotations to reveal precisely how Michael's grooves defined these anthems. We'll also examine private correspondence that surfaced in Discovery, handwritten notes Eddie scrawled to Michael in the early 1980s, pledging no more surprises. Those promises now echo through courtrooms. Stay tuned as we continue unfolding this landmark story of friendship, betrayal, and the fight for rightful legacy. Now we turn to the music itself and dissect two signature tracks where Michael's bass lines are not mere support, but co-drivers of the song's soul. First up, Panama. Recorded in late 1979 at Sunset Sound, the band ran through the iconic riff more than 20 times before nailing the tempo. Michael's original demo, preserved in a lo-fi cassette found in his personal archive, reveals an extra half-note flourish in measure 16 that never made the final cut. That flourish, a syncopated thump on the downbeat, gave the song its motoric pulse, urging Eddie's solo to skyrocket. On the master tape, however, that quarter-note rest replaced his signature fill, smoothing the transition but sacrificing a moment of tension that Michael insists was crucial. We spoke with engineer Don Londy, who confirmed that the raw blend of kick drum and bass guitar created a rhythmic triangulation that shaped the track's groove. When you isolate Michael's stem, you hear the push-pull between his left hand and Alex's ride cymbal, Londy says. That interplay anchors the song. Side-by-side audio comparisons, which we'll play, illustrate how adding back Michael's missing fragment transforms Panama from a polished rocker into a taut, almost experimental composition. Equally illuminating is Unchained, a concert staple featuring Eddie's harmonics and a pounding drum intro. In rough mixes, Michael's bass enters earlier than in the official release, weaving under Eddie's primary riff with melodic countermelodies. Original charts show an alternate bass pattern in bar 8, a descending octave run that complements Eddie's tapped harmonics. In the final mix, producers cut that run to spotlight the guitar, leaving a more predictable bass pocket. We obtain scan charts bearing Michael's pencil markings and Eddie's heavy red pen corrections, scribbled, "Mikey, let's keep it tight." Those corrections appear in deposition materials, underscoring a dynamic where Eddie asserted editorial control. Yet when Michael plays his unedited bass isolate, listeners discern how his octave run prefigures the song's key change, foreshadowing the harmonic shift that gives Unchained its dramatic arc. "You feel it," says Ted Templeman, the track's producer. Michael's bass didn't just hold down the low end, it narrated the form. Alongside these stem-level analyses, private correspondence from Discovery sheds light on the human side of these creative battles. In an undated handwritten note scrawled on lined studio note paper, dated tentatively June 1981, Eddie wrote to Michael, "Mikey, love your work, no more surprises, promise. Let's rock the world." That promise, preserved in court exhibits, once symbolized camaraderie. Now, as legal filings reveal, it acquires a sharper edge, a contractual assertion of good faith that Michael's attorneys argue was breached when credits were altered without his consent. The very phrase, "no more surprises," now reverberates in depositions and courtroom transcripts, a poignant reminder that personal gestures can become evidence. Beyond these two classics, Michael's imprint shines on later hits like "Why Can't This Be Love," where his melodic bass framework underpins the song's catchy hook. Original demo tapes reveal Michael experimenting with a sliding bass octave riff in the opening bars, an innovation that Eddie later layered with keyboard motifs. Producer Mike Post noted that the song's danceable groove flowed directly from Michael's willingness to push beyond traditional rock lines. When that track skyrocketed up the charts, Michael received no extra composition credit, further fueling his resolve to right these wrongs. Fans have even created mashups restoring his initial bass riff under Eddie's final mix, demonstrating the transformative power of his subtle variations. Bass legends Geddy Lee and John Paul Jones have publicly voiced support, citing their own battles for proper songwriting recognition. In recent interviews, Lee praised Michael's unwavering groove, while Jones described these disputes as emblematic of rock's broader unsung hero problem. Brace for deeper revelations. These technical deep dives reveal two truths. First, that Michael Anthony's contributions were not peripheral but integral to Van Halen's signature sound. Second, that the brief handwritten notes and chart scribbles paint a portrait of collaborators who trusted each other and whose trust was tested. As we rediscover these tracks with fresh ears, it becomes clear that reuniting Michael's parts with the final mixes not only enriches the listener's experience, but also redeems the narrative of creative partnership. Fans now debate whether official reissues should integrate these original stems for transparent credit and sonic authenticity. In the next section, we will explore how the broader rock community has responded to Michael's revelations, from supportive tributes by fellow musicians to cautionary tales in musician unions. We'll hear from bass legends like Geddy Lee and John Paul Jones, who share their own experiences of credit disputes. Stay tuned as we broaden the lens to examine the cultural ripple effects of Michael Anthony's quest for recognition, an anthem for unsung heroes of music history. Across the rock world, Michael Anthony's revelations have ignited solidarity among musicians and unions. The American Federation of Musicians, AFM, quickly proposed new guidelines requiring formal split sheets before sessions, while the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry convened a panel on metadata transparency. This momentum shifts the conversation from reactive litigation to proactive recognition of all contributors for future work and equity. In the United Kingdom, the Musicians' Union announced ploys to secure retroactive credit reviews in collective bargaining. Spokesperson Laura Bennett said the union would press publishers to reopen archives and negotiate equitable compensation for session players. Meanwhile, federations in Europe and Asia are drafting model clauses to ensure metadata and digital credits list every performer and arranger. Across continents, institutions are crafting a new blueprint for transparency. Artists in country, jazz, and pop genres have echoed calls, signaling cross-genre solidarity and reform. Geddy Lee, whose bass work shaped Rush's progressive sound, recorded a video message praising Michael's stand. "When you lay down a cornerstone groove," he said, "it becomes part of the building's architecture." Lee recounted a mid-1980s tour where his own performance contributions were overshadowed by promotional focus on the frontman's flamboyant stage costumes. "We're all architects of our songs," Lee insisted, "and architecture deserves your name on the blueprint." Lee's appearance on a charity livestream for Planned Parenthood doubled as a fundraiser for underpaid background musicians. John Paul Jones, foundational to Led Zeppelin's thunderous chemistry, shared an essay in Rolling Stone dissecting how 70s recording contracts often failed to anticipate modern royalty streams. He described a spot on Stairway to Heaven, where his subtle mandolin flourish underpins the chorus, a moment that shifted the song's emotional intensity, and lamented that his name rarely appears in popular commentary. "Michael Anthony's resolution resonates with me," Jones wrote. "It reminds musicians that our legacies depend on owning the narrative as much as the notes." The ripple effect extends to younger indie acts. Brooklyn-based singer-songwriter Arlo Moyes told us that she now negotiates explicit co-writing and arrangement clauses for every session. Nashville session guitarist Brandon Miller created a viral TikTok guide on how to document contributions in real time, complete with downloadable templates for mobile devices. Their viral posts helped generate a movement encouraging Kickstarter-style crowdfunding of royalties, where fans can invest in songs and receive direct statements of contribution. "Transparency is the new currency," Miller declared. Music industry conferences have updated their agendas. At the 2023 South by Southwest, a panel titled, "Who Deserves the Credit?" featured scholars, producers, and artists debating a fair split. Moderator Quincy Jones, too, led heated debates on whether session contributions warrant equal billing with headline artists, and how modern AI transcription tools might help verify recording participation. The panel concluded with a consensus recommendation: adopt a universal credit standard that includes arrangement, production, and performance roles, visible on every streaming platform. On the legal front, entertainment law firms are fielding unprecedented inquiries. Lawyers report a 40% surge in musicians requesting audits of historic contracts after Michael's lawsuit went public. Many cite fears of overlooked metadata in digital distribution, buried IPS tagging that doesn't list individual performers. Major labels quietly convened a summit to explore amnesty programs, retroactively correcting credits in exchange for limited liability. While no formal announcements have emerged, insiders suggest broad changes could reshape catalog royalties across multiple genres. Even fan communities have organized. On Reddit, the r/We Are Van Halen subreddit launched a Credit Michael petition delivering over 10,000 signatures to Eddie's estate. A Spotify playlist called Unsung Grooves reached 500,000 followers, celebrating tracks where supportive contributors shine. Podcasters like Song Exploder devoted special episodes to Michael Anthony, dissecting his playing and career anecdotes. These grassroots efforts demonstrate that fans seek a more nuanced understanding of song creation, rewarding not just the face of a band, but the heartbeat beneath. Michael Anthony's fight reverberates beyond Van Halen lore. It has become a catalyst for systemic reform. His stand at 70 underscores a timeless truth: every note, riff, and beat is woven by many hands. As artists and institutions heed this call, future generations will demand a legacy of collaboration, not invisibility. When the final credits roll on any record, let every contributor's name shine, honoring the collective labor that transforms riffs into rock anthems.